My name is Dario and welcome to the lesson 12 of OpenXava. In the previous lesson, we have seen how to calculate amounts using the default value calculator annotations on collections. You can see more about this lesson following this link. We will now see how to implement totals using the calculation annotation. Sometimes the calculated properties are not the best option. As you can see here, imagine that you have a calculated property in invoice named discount. If we need to process all this invoice with a discount greater than 1000, we have to code something like this. But we will have a problem here, because we cannot use a condition in the query to discriminate by discount, because discount is not in the database, it is only in the Java object. So you have to instantiate every object in order to ask for the discount. In some case, this way is a good option, but if you have a really huge amount of invoice and only a few of them have the discount greater than 1000, then your process will be very inefficient. What alternative do we have? Our alternative is to use the calculation annotation. As we can see in this code, calculation is an OpenXava annotation that allows us to associate a simple calculation to a persistent property. This is a regular persistent property that is with the corresponding column in the database, but this has a calculation defined with the calculation annotation. In this case, the calculation is amount by 0.10. So wherever the user changes amount to the user interface, this count will be instantly recalculated. The recalculated value will be saved in the database when the user clicks on save, just like in any persistent property. We also have annotated discount with the read-only annotation, so it looks and behaves like a calculated property, although we can omit the read-only annotation so the user could modify the calculated value. The most useful thing about calculation properties is that you can use it on conditions, so you can rewrite the above process as shown in the following code. In this way, we put the weight of selecting the records on the database server and not in the Java server. Moreover, the discounts are not recalculated each time they are already calculated and saved. This fact also has an effect in the list mode, because the user cannot filter or order by calculated properties, but he can do so using persistent properties with calculation. So, calculation is a good option when we need filtering and sorting, and a simple calculation is enough. A shortcoming of calculation properties is that their values are recalculated only when the user interacts with the record and change some value of the properties used in the calculation. Therefore, when you add a new calculation property to an entity with existing data, you have to update the value of the new column in the table using SQL. On the other hand, if you need a complex calculation with loops and consulting other entities, you still need a calculated property with your Java logic in the getter. In this last case, if you need to sort and filter in list mode, for the calculated property, an option is to have both the calculated and the persistent property and synchronize their values using JPA callback methods. We will talk about JPA callback methods in future lessons. We want to add amount to order an invoice to. To calculate that, base amount and total amount are indispensable. To do so, you only need to add a few properties to commercial document class, as we can see in this image, and how we will do it next. So, here in commercial document, we will be adding 3 new fields, starting with a big decimal 1 named VAT percentage. We will use here digits annotation to determine the size for integer and for fraction. Now we will add here another field from from big decimal to named but. Here we will be using 3 new annotations, one for calculation. In this case we will be using sum, and here we will be adding details amount for but percentage. Okay, we will be using here two one stereotype, in this case for money, and one more for read only. That's because we don't want the user change this value. And the third one will be big decimal 2, in this case it will be named total amount with these annotations, one for calculation, in this case will be sum, and times amount plus but. This is only logic. And one more for stereotype, money in this case, and it will be read only 2. So that's it. We have done here the code for the but and the logic for it. Note how we have chosen calculation plus read only persistent properties over calculated properties for but and total amount, because the calculations are simple and filtering and ordering for them is very useful. Also, you can see how in calculation you can use sum to refer to the sum of the columns amount of the collection details. In this way we don't need to have a base amount property. On the other hand, but percentage is a conventional persistent property. In this case we use the digit annotation, that is annotation from bin validation, the validation standard of Java, as an alternative to the column annotation to specify its size. Now that we have written the amount properties of commercial document, we need to modify the list of the properties of the collection to show the total properties of the commercial document. Let's see it. So we need to modify the code in this way. And that's it. Total properties are regular properties of the entity that are placed in the user interface below the column of a collection. For that, in the list properties annotation, we use the square brackets after the property to enumerate them, like in the example amount. Moreover, if we want just the summation of the column, we don't need the property for that. With a plus after the property in list properties annotation is enough, like the amount plus. In our case, we combine both things, plus and total properties between square brackets. Now we can try your application. Remember that but percentage does not have a default value defined. We will add it in the next lesson. So start your application. When we enter our application, if we go to invoice and create a new invoice, we can see here the VAT percentage, VAT and total amount fields. If we select here a new product, we can see how the amount and total amount are recalculated. Remember that we don't have a default value for VAT, so we need to introduce it manually. In this case, 21%. And look here how VAT is recalculated automatically. So this functionality is working fine. In this lesson, we have learned how to define persistent properties with specific calculations using the calculation annotation, and we saw the usefulness of the digit annotation to define the type and length of the fields. We also defined total properties using persistent properties with the read-only and calculation annotations, and we saw how to use sum to override a specific property. So, how was the lesson? Don't forget to leave your comments, like this video, and you can subscribe to our channel for future content. See you soon!